Well, thanks so much indeed. I am Jim Ferguson. I've got a real good friend to the channel here. His name is Wayne from What's Up Canada. Welcome to the show, Wayne. Great to see you. How are you doing?
Excited, Jim. I always get excited. Can't sleep the night before when I get a chance to talk to my friends over across the pond.
Yeah. Well, it's great to see you here, and I have to pay tribute to you. You know, we've been doing some Spaces events there. You were a great co-host. You did a tremendous job in there, and I think having that representation when we were talking about Freedom to International, what was going on with mass illegal immigration, all the kind of things that was happening, it really helps people to understand what's really happening in their own respective countries. So I pay tribute to you for that. Just for the sake of the audience, Wayne, would you just say a little bit about who you are, your background, where, roughly speaking, where you're located, that type of thing, please?
Well, I may very well be Canada's most censored, independent, authentic journalist. I've been you're leading the charge in the independent space, kind of the tip of the spear. Not my description, but others for about 5 years now, and I've made it a personal mission to uncover and expose corruption and evil and darkness. So it's really been very simple for me. It's been a calling more than a mission. And I eat, sleep, and live and breathe the fight for humanity. Really, really simple. I'm kind of in central Canada. I've been back and forth across the country too many times to count over the last number of years, just making sure that I'm actually speaking the voice of the people when I do speak. So that's kind of in a nutshell, I guess.
Well, you really are fighting for truth in Canada, and of course, the mainstream media in Canada is pretty heavily censored. We've talked about that in the past. I've had many other guests who say the same thing, and it's so important that people understand what's actually really happening around the world in our respective countries. And I'm delighted to have you back on with me. So, I mean, we know, I mean, Freedom Train International modeled itself and paid tribute and launched on the anniversary of the freedom movement in Canada. So you guys really led the way. And I've got so many good memories of being in Toronto and Ottawa towards the end of last year, meeting so many of you. And I really do pay tribute to every Canadian who took that principled stand, and you are one of them. And I'm always honored to speak to the great people of Canada. So look, I think it's our turn, Wayne. We've just had a change of government here in the UK. We've got Kier Starmer, who is in as Prime Minister. Before that, we had a decade and a half of Richie Sunak and the fake Conservative Party. They're only Conservative in name only. And that's a large part of why they had an electoral wipeout, the worst result for the Conservative Party in the UK ever. But I think what happened was it was a bit of a sort of a pushback against him and what they did with mass illegal immigration. But unfortunately, Kier Starmer got in with a big majority, and boy, he's not wasting time. He is a globalist, of course, a bit like Justin Trudeau in Canada, and he is now operating a two-tier policing system, a two-tier justice system, and he is just accusing millions of ordinary working class British people of being far right, racists, xenophobes, and all the rest of it. And that's not the case. Most people are concerned and truly alarmed at what's going on with the massive amounts of illegal immigration here in the UK, and they're just had enough of it. But it's not just the UK, Wayne, is it? I mean, you're seeing this in Canada right now, aren't you?
That's kind of one of the reasons why you and I first came together was, to me, the parallels of what was happening across our respective nations and everywhere that certain individuals had influence. Were experiencing the same issues, although the people within those nations may not have seen it as such because they're just at different stages of the crisis. And I think the West is really getting a rude awakening right now to some of those things that we were trying to highlight and warn people of. And where you guys are at now in the UK is kind of actually similar to where and how we ended up with Justin Trudeau. People weren't recognizing that a runaway freight train going down that side of the hill with the brakes on or without the brakes on, and with the conservatives it was a runaway train with the brakes on towards globalism. And now you guys have this minority desperate government that is trying to take the brakes off of this globalist train. And one of the parallels that I'd like to make is you guys got jumped from the frying pan into the fire when it comes to globalists with Kier Starmer, and Canada's about to potentially do the same in getting rid of Justin Trudeau to be replaced potentially by somebody like Mark Carney, which is not just a runaway freight train going down the hill with no brakes on. He's hitting the gas on the way down the hill as well. And that's kind of what you guys ended up with Kier Starmer. These guys are a cut above the Richie Sunaks as far as their friends, their alignments, their cronyism, their commitments to the international rules-based order that no common folk have ever elected anywhere in any of our countries. But I think that this is people are starting to see the parallels as England escalates in this desperate move to entrench globalism there, and it's a panic show. And this is how we're seeing it out here is literally a nation in crisis and panic right now in a different way than I think England has ever experienced.
Well, we have things like the Magna Carta, so freedom of speech, the ability to air your opinions is enshrined in law. Yet we've had Kier Starmer and indeed Sir Mark Rowley, the head of the London Metropolitan Police, threaten not just people in the UK, independent journalists, citizen journalists, these types of people, but they've gone one step further. They're now threatening people in North America. They're people in the United States, people in Canada, even other people in Europe from reporting what's actually going on. Even if they're covering these civil disturbances, the riots, the burning of cars and the protests, they're saying that you could actually be arrested. And I mean, honestly, Wayne, it's gone crazy here in the UK. And we're seeing
so evil. All you can do is laugh at them.
Well, yeah, that's true. And of course, my channel has got a large Canadian audience. It's also got a large American audience as well. And their comments, I mean, I love to read their comments. It's like, yeah, bring it on. You think you're going to extradite Americans and Canadians to Britain to face charges of some kind of, promoting some kind of civil disorder. That is not what most people are doing. They're simply reporting the news. But the globalists are losing the information more, despite all their infiltration of the lying mainstream media and the large amount of money that's being given to not just television shows or news channels, but actually journalists and sort of newspapers. I mean, they are putting large sums in, but despite all of that, they're still losing the information war. And you and I both saw what happened at their last meeting in Davos, where they said that their primary mission wasn't on curing world cancer or stopping international wars or anything good for humanity. No, their primary focus was on what they term misinformation and disinformation. In other words, if you're saying something that doesn't fit with their narrative, then they accuse you of misinformation, disinformation, and try and shut you down. I mean, what's the situation with independent journalists in Canada? Are they breaking through this sort of globalist narrative, or is it still pretty bad over with you guys?
I would suggest that internationally and globally, we absolutely are, Jim, and no nation can take credit for that at this point, because what we're seeing is a unification across the planet, across the world, that forced those guys in January, as you mentioned, to to drop everything that they had been working on for the last 30 years to now suddenly deem their top two priorities as dealing with information that they didn't like and rebuilding trust, which at this point was trying to turn the Titanic when the bow was already underwater, in my opinion. And the response over here in the West has been, it's kind of a double-edged sword. We understand, those of us that are fighting this information war, how critical and how dangerous and how lethal it is. These are real world effects when you have this two-tier policing system, and Canada's got it as well. We've seen that from the convoy, but not as rapid or as arbitrary as what you guys are experiencing there right now. And over here, I think that was a very much a wrong approach for these people in power over there to take this stance. Obviously, they have no concept of what the Western culture is and how our response to this would be. Here, it's very much here, hold my beer. Can I get a free plane ticket to the UK? Come on, extradite me. I want to see this. You're going to need a bigger island, Piers. That's kind of how we're taking it. But make no mistake, we fully understand the gravity of this, but I think we perhaps see the panic more easily, the desperation that the UK government is fumbling with more so than the people that are in the fire. It might not be, the panic might be not be so evident to the people that are getting their heads beat in right now. But this is what we're seeing, and kind of, I guess, how we're responding to it. Elon Musk and Donald Trump the other night was a prime example of what the independent space thinks and how they're going to respond moving forward. And I don't expect that to help the globalists in their endeavors at all. So how they're going to respond to that is going to be challenging and interesting to see.
Well, I very much agree, and I was had a bit of trouble getting logged into that Spaces event with Donald Trump and Elon Musk, but got there eventually. Of course, it turns out that there was a massive DDoS attack, a denial of service attack that took place. Now, where that attack came from, we don't know. It could be from within the United States. It could have been a deep state operation. But anyway, the Spaces event went ahead, and eventually I did get in. And it was very, very interesting what Donald Trump was talking about. In fact, it was fascinating to hear him and Elon Musk discuss the assassination attempt, the election that was coming up, and the general sort of desperation of the globalists to try to censor free speech. And of course, Elon Musk himself has come under heavy attack here in the United Kingdom from the mainstream media as well. They've portrayed him as some kind of racist, right-wing thug. And Elon Musk actually is not any of these things. Neither is Donald Trump. They just speak their minds, and they're not in a position where they've been infiltrated by globalists. They are not part of their club. And that's what the globalists don't like. They want people that they can control, and they cannot control Donald Trump. They cannot control Elon Musk. But there are people within the European Union as well, like Thierry Britain, who have threatened Musk. And I just wonder, in your opinion, Wayne, if you think that that's going to affect X or Twitter, as it used to be known as, in those nations. I know what I would like to see. I would like to see people like Kier Starmer have their X account suspended, because the previous regime did that to Donald Trump. They did it to all the right-wing conservative voices that were out there. Anybody that was speaking out against COVID vaccine mandates, for example, got silenced. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily the right thing to do, but I think if they are seriously looking at taking X down, then Elon Musk should consider some fairly robust action that would maybe silence them and deplatform them. And maybe they would find out what that feels like. What do you think?
In what world do we live in that two men sitting down to have an unscripted conversation should be so dangerous, and that the whole world should fear these two men having a conversation? I think they have not realized yet that their knee-jerk reactions always end up blowing up in their face. And this is a perfect case in point of that, where I think in one fell 2 hour swoop, Elon Musk and X rendered the entire globalist New World Order mercenary mockingbird machine irrelevant, redundant, and dead on its feet. That's really what I think what was proven there with that. If that one, two guys sitting down for a conversation could reach more people than all of the mercenary media combined over a month's time. These guys did that, and this is what they fear the most. So now they're in this position where the only thing they have left is what we call the dog whistle, when they try to manufacture darkness against somebody else. There's a big story breaking here in Canada about organizations receiving, hundreds of thousands of dollars to do exactly that, to manufacture boogeymen, bad guys, to pretend that, when people don't ask questions, when they come out, our government comes out, for example, here in Canada, and says Catholics are the biggest, greatest, dangerous threat to the New World Order. Where does that come from? They're not just, inventing this stuff out of their brains. There are multi-million dollar organizations that exist to do that. They operate in all of our countries, UK, Canada, US. And these are the guys that are absolutely mortified, because when they have nothing left and even censorship doesn't work, how weak and shriveled up are they? This is, I think, the point. I think we've reached the point that they were so desperately terrified of in January, and I think the world's getting a lesson that we don't need BBC or CBC or NBC or any of these weaponized outlets of narrative. They hold no life left.
That you made a great point. I mean, that is what it is. It's weaponized media. They are following a globalist agenda. They've weaponized television. They've weaponized the newspapers. They've weaponized these other platforms to attack anybody that goes against their narrative. It is big business, and there's a lot of people who have been, let's face it, effectively bribed and bought off by the globalists. I mean, we must never underestimate the power and the wealth that these people have, but they are in the minority. But unfortunately, they do have their puppets in control. Wherever you find globalist infiltrated governments and parliaments, you see the same mindset, you see the same effects playing out. I wonder, Wayne. I mean, you're in Canada. You're not that far away from the United States. There's a lot of similarities, a lot of differences between the Canadians and the Americans, of course, but there's a lot of similarities too. But I mean, in terms of the election in November, can you foresee anything that the globalists might try to do that would either interfere with the election process? What's your thoughts on that? And if they did, what do you think would happen?
How many coups can the US successfully pull off in 1 year? They're not done. They're absolutely desperate, in my opinion. The I hate to breathe life into negative things, but these people are desperate, and when they get desperate enough, they will do horrible things, as the world saw with JFK Jr. And I don't believe that they're going to stop. Trump's mere existence is a threat to them. I would not be stunned to see them take drastic and insane measures. They're escalating to a war in the Middle East. Ukraine war is falling apart. These guys, I wouldn't put it past them to try and blame Iran for sending a drone in that they actually controlled to try and take out an entire block that Trump might be present in. This is, to me, the level of desperation that these guys are reaching, and that is my biggest concern, is that somehow they managed to find some plausible methodology to try and intervene on the election, because right now their media construct of the new, suddenly popular, most hated politician in the US, Kamala Harris, that's not going to stick. That's not even plausible, and this is going to lead to more and more drastic measures if as time goes by here towards the election. So it's really going to be interesting to see how they try to distract and maneuver the narrative to try and achieve their goals. It's a desperate, weak regime, and it's not even the American regime that's controlling this. These are oligarchs. These are internationalists. They're scattered all over the world. A large number of them have been using Canada as cottage country for decades. People in Europe probably aren't aware of how much a Canadian oligarch actually influences everything that goes on in Europe. When you've got a guy like David Thompson who owns Reuters, but is funded by BlackRock to deliver the news to Reuters for $10 billion a year, and they control basically the European Writers Association as well. So here you have a Canadian oligarch that is controlling the news and media narrative of one of the most trusted outlets on the planet that all narratives seem to stem from. This is the kind of thing that we're lacking in alternative infrastructure in order to combat these guys. So until we can take our communities out of their toxic cesspool, it's going to be an uphill climb. But the world is getting much smaller when it comes to the truth, and it's the deception. It does not carry the weight that it used to. And these are the things that make me nervous, because these guys never actually react in an equal and opposite reasonable fashion. They always take it to the extreme. Every problem is solved with a sledgehammer with these guys. So watch for the sledgehammers.
Well, we're starting to see the sledgehammers getting swung by Kier Starmer and his Gestapo. And I don't use that word lightly. It is almost Nazi-esque in terms of what they're doing. And free media is there for a reason to report, to inform, and to also air opinions. Well, the globalists don't like that. And of course, they don't like the fact that they're being challenged, because they are absolutely desperate to cling on to power. And I think that's another reason why they're so desperate to stop Donald Trump and his re-election as president of the United States, because I think his first round as president was reasonably moderate. He didn't cause any world conflicts. In fact, it was probably the most prosperous period of time that the United States has seen in a long period of time. But he has come under sustained attack. His businesses have been attacked. His family's been attacked. And they've tried to kill him. And there's a lot of people still asking a lot of questions about how that man called Crooks was able to get so close, because he was millimeters away from being killed. And there is speculation that that was a globalist deep state operation to take him out. Well, it looks like they've really crossed the line there. And Trump, if he didn't already realize it, now he knows what they're quite capable of doing. So if he does get back in as president of the United States, and I hope he does, can you see him maybe going after the likes of George Soros, Bill Gates, the Clintons, and all that other billionaire club of Kabbalists who are really, really worried about their illegal activities, their corruption, their underhandedness being exposed? And if he does get back in, how quickly do you think he might go after them, using his position as president over all the different three-letter agencies, and of course with the mighty American military behind him as well? Do you think he will do that?
It's interesting. For me, the number one thing he has to do is survive. He'll win. And I think that the very moment that that happens, the the creatures will go scurrying. The impact will be immediate. And I think people maybe misinterpret how he is going to go after them. He is not going to stoop to the Starmer level of Stasi engagement. No, he's going to go after them where it's effective and it hurts. He's going to go after the money. He is going to stop the grift. He is going to stop the theft, the money laundering, and the corruption. And that's kind of like a Jenga pile. When you take enough blocks out of that, it will absolutely collapse. He's not going to stoop to the Biden level of lawfare and persecution of his opposition. He doesn't need to, because he's got the truth on his side. He does not have to manifest lies and make a media construct out of it. There's enough evidence overwhelmingly around the world to corroborate everything that he suggests. And, this is the interesting part about that conversation that he had with Elon Musk. There's absolutely nothing that was new or shocking or revealing about that conversation. And yet they, even here in Canada, we have our entire media ecosystem in the mercenary space is obsessed with how now Musk is somehow guilty of advancing his far right agendas by hosting a discussion on his platform. If that isn't the most glaring example of weak fear, I don't know what is. And this is, fear stinks. And it's their actions here in Canada are only emboldening their demise towards the people, because here in Canada we have a voice in that, because our government 100% funds the mercenaries, where the people are going to pull that string out from underneath them. So these guys are feeling very, very threatened. They are dangerous when threatened, and this is how they lash out, is by labeling falsely another country's discussion that really has no impact on our countries. Why should our countries take such cause and offense at two men in America having a conversation? Right? It's just.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, if you are so confident of your own position, whether politically or whatever, you won't fear a healthy debate. But when you start to see the regime react the way they're reacting here in the United Kingdom, and of course in Canada as well, and in other countries, then what it does is it exposes their weakness. It exposes their lack of ability to argue their own particular narrative. And instead, what they're doing is they're moving to an authoritarian type regime, a dystopian, almost dictatorial type mindset, where they shut down dissent. They will enforce it with the powers of the law and the police. They will go after people who are speaking up and airing their opinions that they don't like. This is one step removed from the old Soviet Russia, or, as I said, so the Nazi type mindset in Nazi Germany. This is a debate, as you quite correctly said, between two well-known men, Donald Trump and Elon Musk. There was nothing particularly controversial about it. It was actually quite fascinating to hear how moderate they were talking. They were talking, and indeed, in the UK, there have been headlines screaming for the arrest of Elon Musk, the extradition of Elon Musk to face charges. He's done nothing but offer people a platform. And let's be honest, Wayne, I mean, you and I wouldn't have come across each other if it wasn't for Elon Musk and X. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for X. And to be honest, we owe Elon Musk a debt of gratitude for giving a powerful platform to people to counter the lying mainstream media that's controlled by the globalists. Now, I'm keen to know as well is, do you think that the Conservative Party in Canada, if they do take power, would you be confident that they would be better than what's there at the moment? I mean, it's almost hard to imagine that they could be any worse, but could they? Because the Conservative Party in the UK, they became unrecognisable as the Conservative Party. They were Conservative in name only. What's your thinking on that?
Just wanted to throw one point to the last comment out there, is that the conversation between Musk and Trump would have been no different had they been sitting at a country club or at Mar-a-Lago on the eighth hole, having a bevy break and having a discussion. There was no national importance to that discussion, but yet these people are so dangerously offended by this. So that is the absurdity that highlights exactly the Stasi regime that you guys have. And make no mistake, the only difference between the Stasi or the KGB in this case is the work camps. You guys just haven't gotten around to the work camps yet. That's the only dang difference. Like, I mean, 5 days from a social media post to a 30-month sentence in the UK. That's efficient. The 1940 Germans would have been envious of level of efficiency. When it comes to Canada, there's a this is where I get nervous, and I'm bothered by what I'm seeing happening here in Canada. Now, the Conservative Party will not change anything, and I'll explain why. They're not just It's not just that they're conservative in name only. I covered on my show last night where for the last five presidents, the last 5 decades, successful in succession, our prime ministers have been compromised by foreign actors, without exception, all of them. Canada has been infiltrated for a very, very long time. How have they infiltrated Canada? Through unelected foreign policy. And when this quote unquote conservative comes into power, he comes into power with the exact same to-do list as Justin Trudeau had. The difference in character is what Canadians are going to see and fear, I believe, because Trudeau has always been he has always had a jelly spine. He has no fortitude. He has no masculinity. He is a soy boy through and through. He has no ability other than to do anything except throw a temper tantrum in anything that he does. Whereas the incoming conservative leader, the man has a spine. And this could be dangerous given that he has the same to-do list. And people are starting to realize the only difference between these guys is Trudeau does it with flamboyance and arrogance and ego, and conservatives do it through silence and backrooms and shady deals and pretending that they are more responsible. But at the end of the day, they're all on the same trajectory. They're all compromised, and there's a lot of discussion about the Max Bernier party and the PPC, but at the end of the day, it's all still a theater and illusion, because people in Canada even don't realize that Canada is not a sovereign nation. And until we have any one of these quote unquote leaders that are attempting to bring sovereignty to Canada so we can have control of our own future and our own destiny, all they are is passing the baton. Every last one of them, without exception. There is no political solution in Canada unless the people come together and decide for it to be such.
Well, I mean, the way you're speaking about Canada is exactly how I feel about the United Kingdom. There is no real political solution, albeit with one potential difference, and that is that Nigel Farage and Reform UK have had 5 MPs, including Nigel Farage himself, elected into the British Parliament. And because the Conservative Party here got so badly beaten, it is possible that Nigel Farage could get a campaign going for the next general election, which won't take place until probably 2029. That's if the elections are still allowed, unless the globalists have done away with our elections at that point. And who knows? I say slightly tongue-in-cheek, in jest, but in actual fact, I've heard commentary by the likes of Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum talk about there is no need to have any more elections. This is how dictatorial these people think. But I think it would be a bridge too far to take away people's democracy. But I would agree with you that in large part, there is nobody really left to vote for. So what's the solution? What's the alternative? Well, what we're doing in Freedom Train International is we're saying to people, look, just stop being afraid. Learn how to take care of yourselves, your families, how to grow your own food, how to put provisions aside, link up and build these communities and hubs where you're connecting to local food producers, local farmers, bypassing the globalist controlled and owned supermarkets that charge a fortune for all the produce because the farmers don't get much in the way of profit. These middlemen do. And rather than allowing them to control the narrative, start working with each other. And Freedom to International is building an international community, which we only launched a few months ago. But we are already the largest and fastest growing freedom movement now in the world. And we want to encourage people to be independent of the system. The government wants all of us to be dependent on them, regardless of which country we're in. They want people to be dependent on the government. What I'm saying is we should be dependent on ourselves. We need to be able to take a step back because we're going to see more dictatorial controls coming. Things like digital ID, central bank digital currencies, 15-minute smart cities. I mean, do you think the people in Canada, if they get pushed enough? I mean, I know that a large community of Canadians did push back against, in particular, the vaccine mandates. But do you think more and more people are waking up? Are we going to see this great reset that they keep talking about actually turn into a great awakening? What do you think, Wayne?
I think the Great Awakening is absolutely underway. There's some significant differences, between the UK and Canada. Whereas as you mentioned earlier, the Magna Carta being entrenched into your legal system, that when the UK speaks, the world listens differently because you're not the son of or the child of another nation. Whereas with Canada, when Canada speaks, it's really been told to go sit at the kids' table, kind of thing. So there's a difference when England speaks versus when Canada speaks out. But at the end of the other side of that coin is I think that it is. Also, the thing that kind of sets Canada apart is that when the people of Canada stand up, then the world pays attention and takes note. Now they don't listen to our politicians, but the world pays attention to our people, and this is where I am excited by seeing organizations like yours and others that are starting to now gain their own a little bit more. So the conservative nature is pretty much, let me do my thing, work hard, look after my family. They're not organized to this high type of political warfare, and it's taken some time for some the learning curve to come around to that. But the part that makes me nervous is understanding the enemy's playbook, those who seek to control us. They don't care about your Magna Carta. They don't care about the American Constitution. They don't care about any of those things. They try to diminish those things through terms like protecting democracy. And these are the buzzwords that I'm afraid here in Canada that is going to allow them to implement their new systems that they wish for. And Canada is going to be I think, beat you guys to that for a couple of reasons in this. I think that part is going to happen here in Canada first, simply because 42% of the working people in Canada work for the government. The other people that are left working in this country are primarily subsidized by the government. The government pays 75% of their wages. You go to any Tim Hortons in here, and it's all new Canadians, and Trudeau is paying all of their wages. Now, should they decide to make a sudden switch to universal basic income and CBDCs, everybody that is dependent on the government is going to say yes, or I don't eat tomorrow. So this is the leverage I think that they're going to use to try to make it and again they're going to use this. It's for the children's safety. We need to look after the people. The economy has crashed, so we'll give you these food stamps and you can feed your children, and all you have to do is give us your biometrics and we'll look after you. And that's where I think that Canada might be the first or the early adopter of that, and primarily because we have not developed a functioning alternative infrastructure to what they have. We know that these systems are broken. We understand that localism is the 100% safe and effective cure for globalism, but people have been so damaged, so traumatized by the abuse and the psychological warfare being waged upon them that they tend to hide out, isolated, demoralized, and in fear. And this is what what we have to encourage is that these guys are the midget on the stool behind the green curtain, wanting you to shake and quiver in fear, and that is really, really just not the case. So this is where it's so critical, I think, for our nations and the people of our nations to come together on simple things. Like I say this quite often, we can find a million things to fight about, we can find a million problems to identify. Can we find four or five to unify on? Four or five that we can begin to build on to bring our people together to a common good discussion that is not governed and controlled by these midgets on stools behind green curtains.
Well, great point. And of course, you're sort of using the analogy of the Wizard of Oz, an old film that had this wizard that appeared to be very powerful, all powerful, and everybody was terrified of him. But when Dorothy peered behind the curtain, she saw it was just this little dude, an old dude, and he was just using fear to manipulate and control everybody else. And I think when we lose the fear, we are no longer controllable, because people will go, do you know what? We just don't comply with this. We're not going to go along with it. But you're right in an earlier point where you said that the globalists look like they might be becoming desperate. And when they become desperate, they become dangerous. And in the United Kingdom, we've seen another face, a very ugly face of globalism, where they will censor and use the police to attack people that are trying to raise the alarm and trying to speak out against what's going on in our country. Do you think that they might also try to sort of, I guess, go to war with the likes of Russia? If they could ignite a third world war, that could be another massive distraction from the Great Awakening, which I agree is now taking place. What do you think, or how close do you think we might be to seeing something kicking off, either with tied into Ukraine or the Middle East with Iran and Israel? Do you think we could be close to seeing something there escalating?
I think that their ego in the military industrial complex is very, very dangerous. I don't think that they want again, these are just my thoughts through all of the studying and the research that I do. I don't think that they want a full-blown escalation with Russia. They Americans bluff, Russians don't, and Americans, or pardon me, the American infrastructure behind the military industrial complex. I want to be careful how I articulate that, because it's not the American people. The American people don't want any of this nonsense, but it is the military industrial complex that has captured them, and they only profit from war. And the Ukraine was a nice little distraction, and allowed them to line their pockets. They have grifted trillions of dollars out of that conflict. But at the end of the day, they didn't want that conflict to actually escalate, because then they need a bad guy. And the Putin is not the right one for that. He's far too unpredictable. And I think in their heart of hearts, they've realized that the people that lead the American military industrial complex, they may or may not have realized that they have actually neutered their own military through this bioweapons program, and they do not have the capacity. So I think that if they want a world war, I think they will push for that in the Middle East, because they do not want to be forced to take Putin head on, because they will lose. The when Reagan and Gorbachev signed the nuclear arms reduction treaty, Russia went and put their stuff away, but what they did was something different. They started research and development on alternative technologies, and I don't think that the U.S. has anything that can match them right now. So my concern is right now is that with America hedging backing Israel unconditional Middle East, and sending their navies over there, I think that they're going to inadvertently turn them into submarine fleets by doing so, because Iran is not to be trifled with at this point anymore. Why? Because Putin is more than happy to give them what the West has given him, a proxy war. And Putin has manufacturing and capabilities and supply ability to give the Middle East whatever they want to make America and Israel's lives absolute hell. I don't really fear a nuclear escalation from the East. If anywhere or anybody is going to do anything silly like that, it might be the Western military industrial complex may attempt that. And I think that would be a foolhardy mistake too, simply because all of those things would end up dropping destroyed in our own yards. So I don't think that this is something that they really want, but they do depend on the divide and distraction and the conquered in we have to this is a much more complex and deeper situation than that, because there's the some of the factions that we see competing for this world domination are not so obvious to see. People ask me, what is the point of all of this, with the United Nations, World Economic Forum, IMF, and all of those things? And what they're doing is they're normalizing, legitimizing, and industrializing human trafficking on the global scale. Infrastructure recreation across the planet for their human trafficking needs, and they're going to need to control that through digital ID and tokenization of the entire planet. But who's actually behind that is not the United Nations. It's actually the OIC, the Organization for Islamic Coalition, that is the largest single voting bloc in the United Nations. So this is how we have nations, Nigeria as the head of the Human Rights Commission, Alessandro Tedros as the head of the WHO. Come on, these are Islamic terrorists, and this is how these guys get those positions of power and influence. And now we have these policy generation bodies like the IMF and the UN and Klaus and the public-private partnership fascism division that implements it all. They're all literally waging war on the West, coming for what we have, oriented, taking orders. Like who are the guys pulling the strings behind the UN and Klaus Schwab? It comes from the Middle East, unfortunately. And so, until we start to have a more clear, concise picture and articulation on how to deal or address these situations, people are still going to think it's the politician in the suit that's the front facing that should have the sponsor labels on his jacket. Well, who exactly are those sponsor labels, and who funds those sponsor labels? It comes down to Reuters being trusted, owned by an oligarch in Canada, funded by BlackRock. It's that same wash, rinse, repeat system.
There's the old saying, follow the money, and it's true, isn't it? Every single time. Follow the money and you'll find out who's really pulling the strings behind that proverbial curtain. But, we're out of time, Wayne. I've got to say, it's been an absolute pleasure having you back on with me, and thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. It's powerful stuff, so thank you once again. I do appreciate you coming on, and I do appreciate your appreciation of what's going on in Canada and globally as well. So thank you for that, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again real soon.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, I've got to say to all the people out there watching, you've got to follow this man. Wayne Peters is a great voice for America. He's got a great channel. You should follow him, and the links will be in the description. And Wayne, if I get back to Canada, I'm definitely going to see if I can get a chance to meet up with yourself, because I didn't get a chance to see you the last time I was there. But who knows, maybe in the near future that will happen. But to all the wonderful people who are out there listening, who support this channel, who like and who share the content, I'm very humbled. I'm deeply grateful to each and every one of you. And it's really appreciated when you do that, especially for our courageous guests who go and put themselves, their heads above the parapet. They stand up for their principles. They stand up for their country and their communities. And Wayne Peters, What's Up Canada, is a great Canadian patriot and a friend to this channel. So thank you, each and every one of you. And as I always like to say, you guys are the real stars of this show. Until next time, this is Jim Ferguson, and we'll speak soon. Bye-bye for now.